I need to be upfront with you about something that nobody talks about. You're scrolling through your phone at 2 in the morning, heart racing, mind spinning with thoughts you can't control. Maybe it's about work, about money, about relationships, about health, about that thing you said 5 years ago that nobody else remembers but you can't forget. The anxiety feels like it's eating you alive from the inside out, and every self-help book, every meditation app, every well-meaning friend telling you to just relax only makes it worse because you've tried everything and nothing works. But what if I told you that 2,500 years ago, a man sitting under a tree figured out the one thing about anxiety that changes everything, and it's not what you think. It's not about positive thinking. It's not about breathing exercises. It's not about affirmations or visualizations or any of the stuff that the modern wellness industry is trying to sell you. It's something far more radical, far more profound, and honestly, far more challenging than anything you've encountered before. This is the Buddhist secret that ends anxiety forever, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand why you've been fighting anxiety the wrong way your entire life. Let's start with what anxiety actually is, because most of us are walking around thinking we understand it when we really don't. We think anxiety is just excessive worry, that it's our mind going into overdrive about potential future problems. But that's not quite right. Anxiety is actually the suffering that comes from wanting reality to be different than it is. Read that again. Anxiety is the suffering that comes from wanting reality to be different than it is. When you're anxious about a job interview, you're not actually suffering from the interview itself. You're suffering from wanting the outcome to be guaranteed, from wanting to control something that hasn't happened yet. When you're anxious about your health, you're not suffering from your body in this moment. You're suffering from wanting certainty about the future, from wanting to know that everything will be okay. When you're anxious about what people think of you, you're suffering from wanting their thoughts to be different, from wanting to control their inner experience. Do you see the pattern here? Anxiety is always about resistance to what is or what might be. Now here's where Buddhism comes in with an insight so profound that when you really get it, not just intellectually but in your bones, everything changes. The Buddha's core teaching, the thing that everything else flows from, is contained in what's called the Four Noble Truths, and the first one is this: life involves suffering. But here's what gets lost in translation, what most people completely misunderstand. The word that gets translated as suffering is dukkha in Pali, the language the Buddha spoke, and it doesn't just mean pain or misery. It means unsatisfactoriness, dissatisfaction, that fundamental feeling that something is off, that something is lacking, that things aren't quite as they should be. And the Buddha said this is the basic characteristic of existence, not because life is terrible, not because we should be pessimistic or depressed, but because we're constantly, unconsciously expecting reality to deliver permanent satisfaction, and it can't. It's not built that way. Everything is constantly changing, nothing lasts, nothing stays the same, and yet we keep demanding that it should. Think about your anxiety right now, whatever form it takes. Isn't it fundamentally about this? You're anxious because you want stability in an unstable world. You want certainty in an uncertain universe. You want control over things that are inherently uncontrollable. You want your body to never get sick, your relationships to never change, your career to always be secure, your mind to always feel good. And reality just keeps saying no, not because it's cruel, not because you're doing something wrong, but because that's not how reality works. Trying to get permanent security from an impermanent world is like trying to build a house on the surface of the ocean. It doesn't matter how good your construction skills are, the foundation itself is unstable. So what's the solution? And this is where Buddhism gets really interesting, really radical, and really different from almost every other approach to anxiety. The solution is not to fight anxiety. It's not to replace negative thoughts with positive ones. It's not to calm yourself down or convince yourself everything will be fine. The solution is to stop doing the thing that creates anxiety in the first place. And what is that thing? It's clinging, it's grasping, it's attachment. These are the English words we use to translate Tanha, which literally means thirst or craving. The Buddha said that the cause of dukkha, the cause of this fundamental unsatisfactoriness and anxiety, is Tanha. It's this desperate grabbing at experience, this constant reaching for pleasure and pushing away pain, this endless attempt to manipulate reality into giving us what we want. Now, before you think this means Buddhism is telling you to become a robot who doesn't care about anything, let me be crystal clear. The Buddha is not saying you shouldn't have preferences. He's not saying you shouldn't pursue goals or enjoy pleasant experiences or work to avoid genuinely dangerous situations. What he's pointing to is something much subtler. He's pointing to the desperate, tight, clenched quality of mind that says, I need this to be happy, or I can't handle it if that happens, or this has to work out my way or I'm screwed. That's Tanha. That's the craving mind. That's what creates suffering. And here's the wild part, the part that seems almost too simple to be true. When you stop doing that, when you stop adding that layer of desperate grasping to your experience, the anxiety just dissolves. Not because your circumstances changed, not because you got what you wanted, but because you stopped creating the suffering in the first place. Let me give you a concrete example, because this can sound very abstract. Let's say you're anxious about money. You check your bank account and feel that familiar knot in your stomach. Now, most anxiety advice would tell you to challenge your thoughts, to remind yourself that you've made it through tough times before, to make a budget, to take action. And all of that might be useful, but it's not what the Buddha is pointing to. The Buddha would ask you to look very carefully at what's actually happening in your mind. You see the number on the screen. That's just information. But then immediately, almost instantaneously, your mind adds a story. This means I'm not safe. This means I'm failing. This means I won't be able to handle life. This means something terrible is going to happen. And then it starts grasping, I need more money. I have to figure this out. I can't be in this situation. That grasping, that desperate quality, that's where the suffering is. The number on the screen is just a number. The anxiety is in how your mind is relating to it. The Buddhist practice is to see this mechanism so clearly that you stop doing it unconsciously. And how do you do that? This is where meditation comes in, but not in the way most people think. Most people think meditation is about relaxation or clearing your mind or achieving some special peaceful state. That's not it at all. Meditation in Buddhism is about developing what's called mindfulness or awareness. It's about training yourself to see what's actually happening in your experience moment by moment, rather than being lost in the story your mind is telling about what's happening. When you sit down to meditate, you're not trying to stop anxiety. You're learning to watch it arise, to see how it forms, to observe the desperate grasping quality that accompanies it, and to let it be there without adding more struggle on top of it. This is crucial, so I'm going to say it again in a different way. The instruction is not to get rid of anxiety. The instruction is to stop fighting with anxiety. Because here's another layer of the problem that most people don't realize. Your anxiety about your anxiety is often worse than the original anxiety. You feel anxious, then you feel anxious about feeling anxious, then you feel like something is wrong with you for being anxious, then you feel hopeless because you can't make the anxiety go away. You've added layers and layers of suffering on top of the original discomfort. Buddhism says you can stop doing that. You can let anxiety be what it is, a temporary arising in your experience, without making it mean something terrible about you or your life. There's a famous Buddhist metaphor about this. The Buddha said that when an untrained person experiences physical pain, they experience two pains, the physical pain and the mental suffering that comes from resisting the pain, from hating it, from desperately wishing it wasn't there. But a trained person, someone who understands this teaching, only experiences one pain, the physical sensation itself, without all the extra mental anguish. The same is true for anxiety. When you feel that flutter in your chest, that racing mind, that sense of dread, there's the actual sensation, and then there's all your thoughts about how terrible it is that you're feeling this way, how you need it to stop, how you can't function like this. The sensation is just energy moving through your body. All the rest is extra. Now let's go deeper into why this works, because this isn't just philosophy or positive thinking dressed up in Eastern terminology. There's a profound psychological truth here. Your anxiety is fed by your attention to it in a specific way. When you're anxious and you focus on the anxiety with an attitude of, this is terrible, I need to make this stop, something is wrong, you're actually strengthening the neural pathways that create anxiety. You're teaching your brain that this sensation is dangerous, which makes your brain produce more of the sensation because it thinks it's protecting you from a threat. It's a vicious cycle. But when you can turn toward the anxiety with an attitude of curiosity, with an attitude of, oh, this is what anxiety feels like right now. These are the thoughts that are arising. This is the sensation in my chest. Something fascinating happens. You're no longer feeding the cycle. You're no longer confirming to your brain that this is an emergency. The anxiety might still be there, but it starts to lose its grip on you because you're not giving it the fuel it needs to sustain itself. This is what the Buddha meant by the third noble truth. There is an end to suffering. Not by getting everything you want, not by controlling your external circumstances, not by thinking your way out of it, but by releasing the grasping that creates the suffering. And the fourth noble truth lays out the path to do this, which includes ethical conduct, meditation practice, and the development of wisdom. But at the core of all of it is this one insight: let go of the grasping, and the suffering ceases. Here's where this gets really practical, really applicable to your life right now. You don't have to become a Buddhist. You don't have to believe in reincarnation or karma or anything metaphysical. You just have to be willing to experiment with this one shift in how you relate to your anxiety. The next time you feel anxious, instead of immediately trying to fix it or get rid of it or figure out what's wrong, try this. Acknowledge that anxiety is present. Notice where you feel it in your body. Notice what thoughts are arising. And then, this is the crucial part, notice the grasping. Notice the part of your mind that's saying, I can't handle this, or this has to stop, or something is wrong with me. That's the Tanha. That's the craving. And see if, just for a moment, you can let that grasping relax. Not force it, not fight it. Just notice it and let it be. What you'll probably discover is that the anxiety itself is not actually as unbearable as your resistance to the anxiety. The sensations are just sensations. The thoughts are just thoughts. They're uncomfortable, sure, but they're not actually dangerous. You've survived every anxious moment you've ever had. Every single one. The anxiety comes, it peaks, it passes. It always passes. What makes it feel unbearable is the story that this shouldn't be happening, that you can't handle it, that something is terribly wrong. That's the extra layer of suffering that Buddhism teaches you how to drop. There's another aspect of this that's worth exploring, which is the Buddhist teaching on impermanence. One of the three characteristics of existence in Buddhism is anicca, which means impermanence or constant change. Everything that arises passes away. Everything. Your thoughts, your emotions, your physical sensations, your circumstances, your relationships, your body, everything. This isn't meant to be depressing. It's meant to be liberating. Because if you really understand that anxiety is impermanent, that it arises and passes away just like everything else, you stop relating to it as if it's a solid, permanent thing that you're stuck with. You start to see it as weather moving through your inner sky. Clouds come and go, storms come and go, but the sky itself is always there, always open, always able to hold whatever appears. This is why Buddhist practice emphasizes staying present. Anxiety is almost always about the future or the past. You're worried about what might happen or ruminating about what already happened. But right now, in this actual moment, are you okay? Not in 5 minutes, not tomorrow, not in general, but right now. Usually the answer is yes. Right now you're reading these words or hearing this voice. Right now you're breathing. Right now you're alive. The anxiety is a story about a different time. When you can come back to now again and again, the anxiety loses its power, because you're no longer living in the imaginary future where all your fears exist. But here's the thing, and I want to be honest about this because I don't want to oversell this or make it sound easier than it is. This is a practice, it's not a one-time fix. The pattern of grasping and resistance is deeply ingrained. You've been doing it your whole life. Your brain has carved deep grooves for this way of relating to experience. So when I say this secret ends anxiety forever, I don't mean you'll never feel anxious again. I mean you'll develop a completely different relationship with anxiety, one where it no longer runs your life, where it no longer feels like this overwhelming monster that you have to fight or flee from. You'll learn to meet it with awareness, with space, with a kind of friendly curiosity even. And when you can do that, the anxiety becomes just another part of the weather of your experience, not some special terrible thing that means something is wrong with you. The Buddha actually talked about this in terms of the second arrow. He said that when you get hit by an arrow, that's painful, that's the first arrow. But then if you start complaining about being hit, hating that you were hit, asking why this happened to you, that's like shooting yourself with a second arrow. And the second arrow, the one you shoot yourself with, often causes more suffering than the first one. With anxiety, the first arrow is whatever circumstance or thought or physical sensation triggered the anxious feeling. That might be uncomfortable, but it's manageable. The second arrow is all your resistance to it, all your thoughts about how terrible it is, all your attempts to fight it. That's where the real suffering lives. And that second arrow is optional. You don't have to shoot yourself with it. So how do you actually practice this? How do you take this insight and make it real in your life? First, you develop a meditation practice. It doesn't have to be hours a day. Even 10 or 15 minutes of sitting and watching your breath, watching your thoughts, watching sensations arise and pass away. This trains your mind to have the awareness and the stability to work with anxiety when it arises. You're essentially going to the gym for your mind, building the muscle of awareness. Second, throughout your day, you practice noticing when you're grasping, when you're in that tight, anxious, needing mind. You don't judge it. You don't make it wrong. You just notice it. Oh, I'm grasping right now, I'm trying to control this, I'm resisting this, and in the noticing there's already a little bit of space, a little bit of letting go. Third, you question your thoughts. Byron Katie has a whole method for this that's very compatible with Buddhism. When you have an anxious thought like, I'm going to fail, or people will judge me, or I can't handle this, you ask, is it true? Can I absolutely know it's true? Usually the answer is no, you can't know the future. You can't read minds, you're just telling yourself a story. And when you see it's just a story, not reality, not truth, just a story your mind made up, it loses some of its power over you. There's also the practice of loving kindness or metta in Buddhism, which is about developing a quality of warmth and friendliness toward yourself and your experience. When anxiety arises, instead of hating it, instead of feeling like you're broken or weak, you practice meeting it with kindness. You might say to yourself, this is really hard right now. This is what anxiety feels like. May I be kind to myself in this moment? It sounds simple, maybe even silly, but it completely changes the energy around the anxiety. You're no longer at war with yourself. You're holding your own experience with care. The ultimate teaching, though, the deepest secret, is this. You are not your anxiety. You are not your thoughts. You are not your emotions. You are the awareness in which all of this appears. Buddhism points to this fundamental truth over and over. There is a space of consciousness, a field of awareness that is always present, always open, always okay, no matter what appears in it. Anxious thoughts appear in it. Anxious sensations appear in it, but they appear in it the way waves appear in the ocean. The ocean is not disturbed by the waves. The ocean is vast enough, deep enough to hold all the waves without being threatened by them. You are that ocean. You are that space of awareness. And when you start to recognize yourself as that, rather than as the anxious thoughts or the anxious person, everything shifts. The anxiety is still there, but it's happening to a much smaller part of you, and there's this vast, spacious awareness that can hold it without being overwhelmed by it. This is not bypassing. This is not spiritual bypass, where you pretend everything is fine when it's not. This is meeting reality exactly as it is, including the difficult parts, including the anxiety, but meeting it from a place of awareness and space rather than from a place of identification and grasping. It's actually the most honest, most direct way to work with suffering. You're not covering it up with positivity. You're not numbing it or avoiding it. You're turning toward it, looking at it clearly and seeing that it's workable, that you're bigger than it, that you can be with it without being destroyed by it. And here's the beautiful thing. As you practice this, as you get better at not grasping, at not shooting yourself with the second arrow, you start to notice that you're anxious less often. Not because you're trying to be less anxious, but because you've stopped doing the thing that was creating so much of the anxiety in the first place. You've stopped demanding that reality be other than it is. You've stopped needing to control the uncontrollable. You've stopped making every uncomfortable feeling mean something terrible. You've learned to trust yourself to handle whatever arises. And that trust, that confidence, not in your ability to control life, but in your ability to be with life however it shows up. That's what actually ends anxiety. Not the anxiety of this moment necessarily, but the deep chronic anxiety that comes from feeling like you can't cope, like life is too much, like something is fundamentally wrong. The Buddhist path is not about perfection. It's not about becoming some enlightened being who never feels anything difficult. Even the Buddha felt physical pain. Even monks who've been practicing for decades still have moments of challenge, but what changes is the relationship to the challenge. There's wisdom there, there's perspective, there's an understanding that this too shall pass, that this is part of the human experience, that it's okay to not be okay sometimes, and that you don't have to make yourself wrong for feeling what you feel. So this is the secret. Stop fighting, stop grasping, stop adding the second arrow. Meet your experience with awareness, with presence, with kindness. See the impermanence of everything, including anxiety. Recognize yourself as the awareness that holds all experience, not as the anxious person. And practice, 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 because this is a path, not a destination. It's a way of living, a way of meeting life that becomes more natural the more you do it. You're essentially rewiring your brain, creating new patterns, new ways of responding. And it works. Not because I say so, but because you can test it, you can try it. You can see for yourself if meeting your anxiety with awareness and letting go of the grasping changes your experience. That's the beauty of Buddhism. The Buddha didn't ask anyone to believe him. He said, don't take my word for it. Try it, see if it works. Verify it through your own experience. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Not to believe this video, not to accept any of this on faith, but to experiment with it. The next time anxiety arises, remember this. The anxiety itself is not the enemy. Your relationship to it is what needs to change. Let it be there. Watch it. Don't feed it with more stories about how terrible it is. Don't fight it. Just be with it, the way you might be with a scared child, with care, with patience, with space. And notice what happens. Notice if there's even a tiny bit more peace, a tiny bit more freedom. That's the beginning. That's the crack in the pattern. And if you keep practicing, that crack gets wider and wider until one day you realize that anxiety still comes, but it doesn't own you anymore. It's just weather. And you're the sky. Always have been, always will be. That's the secret. That's what ends anxiety forever.